So you meet somebody for the first time, they say, who are you and what do you do? How do you answer that?
Today?
Sure.
I'm a screenwriter. That's what they want to know. In other contexts, I'm a Christ follower. I might even be so bold as to say I'm a Christ-following screenwriter with 14 years sobriety.
You're Ryan Swanson.
Yes. I'm Ryan Swanson.
You are the lead writer,
I'm the head writer.
You're the head writer.
The Chosen.
Of The Chosen.
And an executive producer. I co-write with Dallas Jenkins and Tyler Thompson.
So Ryan Swanson, head writer of that little Jesus show called The Chosen.
Yes.
That's a big deal.
It has become a big deal because we're not in charge and because we're telling the gospel. Through this indirect, brilliant lens, Dallas and Tyler came up with this genius idea about how to tell this story. It was just a tiny tweak that made it accessible, which was to tell the stories written in the Gospels as faithfully, as loyally as we can, but to tell them from the perspective of the people who were present. And so we can wake up with that character. We can dramatize what that event meant for them on their journey, how that event may have presented them with a choice. And then the show becomes dramatic, and we get to keep those stories that are written in the Bible exactly as they are and not co-opt them for our dramatic purposes or editorialize them just to portray them as faithfully as we can. I mean, that's a huge, tiny but huge shift. And Dallas and Tyler had been doing these little short films for Harvest Bible Chapel in Elgin, and that's where they met.
Okay, you've already answered a few questions that I think people would be interested in.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Apple Valley, Minnesota, which is a suburb of St. Paul.
Okay. So you grew up, what kind of student are you? Were you always a writer?
No, I was a hockey player. I was sure that was what I was going to do for my...
Like as a professional athlete, a professional hockey player. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I was a middling student at best.
You had some writing skills. Your essays were good, no?
Essays were good. Yeah. No. As a kid, that was always kind of my saving grace. If it was like an essay test, I could say it in a way that made it seem like I'd attended class.
That's awesome.
And so I made it through high school. I was playing in the USHL for the Green Bay.
Oh, so you weren't just some kid with a dream. You made it pretty far in hockey.
I mean, hockey is culture in Minnesota, okay. Right? So it's like baseball in a lot of parts of the world.
Well, just to be fair, baseball and basketball are culture here in Los Angeles.
Yes.
I didn't play anything past junior high.
No,
so,
it's true. It's true. So I was in Sioux City, Iowa. And I had broken my nose for the second time that season. My front teeth were two nubs from a face-off that I took, and the stick just came up. And I had this thought that honestly hadn't had until that moment was it might not get any better than this.
What won't get any better?
Hockey, it might not get any easier.
Okay.
I might not, be elite in this league or the next.
Okay.
And I was like, what else am I good at? The thing I'm doing is I'm keeping a journal. Okay. I'm reading a ton. I go into that summer or that spring and I see a movie called Pulp Fiction, and I decide the first time I saw it in the theater, I want to do this for a living. You're
playing hockey and you see Pulp Fiction. You're like, man, that's me. You hadn't thought about filmmaking or screenwriting prior to that?
I had thought about writing.
Okay.
And I didn't know what that meant. I grew up in a lower middle class, mom and dad, if you're watching, house in suburban St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay.
My parents' were vets, and Duluth, Minnesota. Like working in Hollywood was a totally far-flung notion.
Do you then say, I need to go to school to become a screenwriter? You can't watch YouTube videos, it doesn't exist yet. How do you become a screenwriter?
Well, I didn't know either. I went for a year to a school in St. Peter, Minnesota called Gustavus Adolphus, which is a Lutheran college, liberal arts. And I transferred the next year to McAllister, which is in St. Paul. So I went from St. Peter to St. Paul.
Keeping with the
Just like
apostles.
the
That's
gospel.
cool, man. That's
yeah.
cool, man. I feel like the book of Acts is playing out in your life.
It's playing out my
Yeah.
life. They didn't. Neither place had anything as specific as screenwriting. So I took some drama classes at Gustavus. I followed through with my English major, and I got a religion studies minor.
Okay.
Which I didn't know what I was going to use.
Is this
that
all
for.
religions, focusing on Christianity, focusing
No,
on?
it was a survey
Okay.
of religions. So
So parallel to all this, at some point, would you have identified yourself as a Christian back then?
yeah, I was raised Methodist.
Okay.
I was confirmed at 13. I stayed in that tradition. I recall my professor advisor said, this isn't a faith promoting sort of exercise, because you're going to be looking at these things academically. You're going to be looking at these things through the lens of, all perspectives. So not just apologists, you're going to be looking at historical deconstructionists who might say the dates don't line up. You might hear about other faiths. But for me, that was exactly where God needed me. Before my senior year, I had taken a trip out to Los Angeles. Didn't know anybody, had no family in town, didn't even know anybody who lived in Los Angeles. So my father had taken me out to LA just to kind of get familiar with the city, because I knew that I was going to move out here. We stopped in, we had the naivete to stop at New Line Cinema, which
Okay.
used to be on Robertson Boulevard,
Okay, gotcha.
and walked into the front door.
Sure.
And went to the person at the desk and
Right.
said, I want to intern on a movie. I looked at Variety and they have this listing of productions coming up. One of them's in Minnesota. Here's my resume. Thank you so much.
So you're pretty bold. You're not shy. You're willing to walk into New Line.
No.
Maybe naive, but walking into New Line.
No, that was sort of a theme for many steps later, but that was the first one.
Okay.
And I went through the whole summer. I was preparing to go back to school. It was a week before classes started, and they called.
Okay.
And they said, hey,
that worked.
they need an intern in the props department.
So at this point, you're not saying, writing or bust. You're saying it's the film business that's attracting you.
I don't even know what I don't know.
Got it.
Right. So I'm just like, get me some exposure to
Okay.
it. And they called a week before school started, and it was a film called Drop Dead Gorgeous, which is
Okay.
now kind of a cult classic. And what a great experience. And I got to know, because I was just a bold kid with a smile and running around and hustling as much as I could. I met the screenwriter of that, a woman named Lana Williams, who had grown up in the town next to mine, who was our high school rival and everything. And by the end of the shoot, she was like, I'm on the Drew Carey Show. Come on out. I'll give you a job
What
in the
year is
writing
this
room.
about?
This is 98.
So 4 years after you watch Pulp Fiction and get inspired, I want to write movies.
Yeah.
4 years later, you're interning at New Line, and you get a writer
Yes.
for the Drew Carey Show.
Yes.
And she says, hey, come along.
Yeah.
What a blessing.
Yeah, when you finish school, call me up.
Okay.
I'll get you in the room. So the week I graduated from school, I packed up my truck. I drove out west.
Okay.
I slept for 2 nights in an RV park in Malibu,
Nice.
and then on somebody's couch. And then a sublet opened up, and I was there. And I called Lana, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm on maternity leave,
Yeah.
and I may not go back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry."
So awesome. Here I am already assuming this is the music is swelling to this beautiful trajectory that will lead to The Chosen.
Yes.
You're out there, you're immediately met with, hi, welcome to Hollywood. Sorry, it ain't gonna work out.
Yeah.
Nice, man. So you pack up your bags, I'm going back to the snow.
No way, no how. Outlast has been my motto. So then I get my sublet was in Westwood, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was working 2 jobs at that point. I was driving delivery for Jerry's Deli, which is the most amazing job to get to know the city and the stories that of people I delivered to. And so I'm getting to know the town. I'm slinging coffee at Coffee Bean.
Yeah.
And I see in the Daily Bruin an ad for an internship for a production company at Sony. And today they would call it stalking. But I called that poor assistant whose number was on the ad a lot. I may have sent 20 faxes with my resume. And finally she she just called me and was like, I give up. I come in, read a script. And after reading scripts, I got a job as the assistant to the VP of development. Now I'm really learning
So this
how
is
to
like
do
a
it.
boot camp for you then. If you're just reading scripts as the assistant to the head of development, you're probably just learning a ton.
Yeah, I'm reading hundreds of scripts every quarter. I mean, I took a script home every night. That's really where I learned how to write, just by reading scripts.
So fast forward then, how did you meet Dallas then?
So, a few stops, and I was working for Joel Silver, all in the same capacity for Susan Levine, who's now Susan Downey, Robert's wife. I was reading scripts for her, and they said to me, there's a guy across the quad, he's a writer, he's looking for an assistant. And that guy was Akiva Goldsman, and he was in the middle of his Oscar campaign for A Beautiful Mind. And I pitched him an idea. He taught me how to write, and the CA picked me up, and I was now a real writer.
So give me a year.
2003.
So 03, you're signed by Creative Artists Agency. That is one of the biggest agencies on the planet.
Yes.
You must be thinking, oh my goodness, I've arrived. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that might have been the problem.
Right.
Is that I really thought I had done something so special.
No, I see the worlds colliding here.
Because how do I bounced from a production company at Sony to Jill Silver.
Nothing but up.
They hand me off to arguably the hottest Hollywood screenwriter of the era.
Yep.
He won the Academy Award for Beautiful Mind. He went on to win it. And now I'm following Akiva around to his movie sets, working on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, working on Constantine, working on iRobot, working on I Am Legend. So I was really high on me and what all I had accomplished at that point. And now I was writing a movie that was shooting in New York. I was doing production rewrites. CA was sending me on meetings. Now I was in New York, so I was taking meetings in New York, and I was going to do a film for Paramount just to do some production rewrites for 3 weeks. I just thought I was so cool.
Yeah.
And I started using effectively speed, but Adderall, like to keep up with it all.
Okay.
Abusing it. I mean, right from the get-go. It's I come from thoroughbred drinkers, right? So yeah, I was just I was blowing jobs.
How so? Because of the drugs?
Because of the drugs, and because.
Are you drinking at this time, or
not
just
yet?
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet. I had a breakup, and then I started drinking. So now I'm using the speed. I'm drinking a lot. It just compounded, the shell that CA dropped me during this period.
Okay.
Because I had I missed deadlines, just blown off jobs.
So the drugs are really taking their toll. Drugs, and now you're drinking, drugs and drinking. And
I just couldn't. I don't think at the time I could get my head around like the connection between how full of self I was, how far I'd strayed from a reliance on a higher power, how much it had all just sort of taken me.
So during this drug time, this drug and alcohol time, you're not reading the Bible. You're not. You're not acting like a Christian. Is that even on your radar at this time?
No.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, except for, being in a sort of running quarrel with God.
But you're conscious of that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, belief was never a problem. Early on in rehab, I came in, and maybe it was with my father, actually, who's a sober guy himself now, 42 years. He... we were like, how's your relationship with God? And I was like, screw God. And he's like, okay, well, belief isn't a problem. So that I was blaming God was,
What are you blaming God for? The addiction, or that your life's not going your way, or
this
what?
turn of events from meteoric, rival to now just like what felt like bad luck. It felt like, punishment. I was really lost, man.
Yeah, man.
And it just got worse and worse, and I drank out my savings, and a fateful juncture, my family invited me out to Wisconsin to celebrate my parents' anniversary. I got there and they had letters in their hands. And they had fooled me. It was an intervention. So I hit my knees and asked God to help. And I landed in rehab, and almost immediately I started seeing God in things again. But yeah, I found myself on my knees asking God to just to join me. I didn't know what. I didn't think I deserved help. I don't know, things were happening so fast, and it felt so unreal that, my relation, I had no idea how far away I'd slipped until I was left just to my own devices. And, the desire to drink went away. I look at it now like it's the simplest thing. I had a God-sized hole that alcohol does a really good job of filling. Like it fits that hole perfectly for me. And in the absence of the Spirit, I am capable of temporarily sort of, puttying it over.
So how did things spiritually change? I mean, I understand the absence of drinking.
Yeah.
But as we talk about in the scriptures, we talk about the put off and the put on.
Yeah.
We certainly must stop the drinking and the drugs.
Yes.
But then there's something that has to replace that. Is God starting to replace that in your life at that time?
It was, and a huge step for me was learning how to pray. It helped me to learn how to think.
The prayer helped you learn how to think.
Prayer helped me
Interesting.
reframe.
I've never heard that before.
I had never encountered it either.
Okay.
And it was something that was wholly new to me, like a lot of truths in sobriety. And I at once became 100% convicted in God's authority and in His presence, and 100% comfortable with the idea that I don't know everything I'm ever going to know. And one of the first, practical things that I did was to say, to honestly assess what am I doing in Hollywood?
Okay.
Do I need this? God doesn't seem to need this for me.
Right.
I was just open.
Yeah.
I said, you show me what's next. And the next right thing was to sponsor a guy who was struggling with benzos and alcohol. And he was a computer programmer. And he was like, yeah, you can teach yourself how to do it. Like, so I started taking online classes to program computers. And then my brother called me and he said, my 9-year-old daughter, she still believes in Santa Claus. How do I tell her that Santa is a game we play, but that Jesus is real? How is she going to distinguish?
Why is he coming to you for this question? You don't have kids.
Because we're close and we're
brotherly
it's just brotherly concern. And I was like, I don't know, get a book. He's like, look, there aren't any.
Go get a book.
You know?
Fair enough.
And so I was like, there aren't any books about that. And so I was like, okay, I'll go write one.
So, okay, just so I'm tracking with you, the book, the theme is how to go from Santa Claus to Jesus?
No, how do you talk to your kids about Santa Claus?
Okay, just
and for
more broad.
him, the shape of it was, my daughter is going to church. She loves God, but she also loves Santa Claus.
Yeah.
One isn't real, and how do I?
Don't tell me. I want to read the book first. Okay.
No, you're not going to find it anywhere. But I went out and interviewed 100 people: teachers, parents, clergy, friends with funny stories.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine says, let's record it and turn it into a podcast. So I do that. I put it out, and my 10th grade Sadie Hawkins date reached out to me. She said, I listened to this. It is so good. You have to meet my husband. And I was like, yeah, okay. She's like, where did you work in Hollywood? We probably crossed paths. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, maybe, you know.
It's 2013.
Yeah, 2013.
Okay, this is awesome. Yeah, this is great.
So her husband was doing a short film festival in North Hollywood.
Okay.
I went and met Dallas Jenkins.
Yeah. How does Dallas Jenkins approach you and say, hey, I've got an idea for a TV show?
He did.
You want to write? How does that work?
We talked there. He wrote something on Facebook. I wrote him back, and he was like, "You know a lot about this stuff." Like, and now he's fond of saying that I've forgotten more than he'll ever know. Okay. I don't think that's true, but he's sweet.
It's a compliment that you know a lot.
To say
sure,
that, you know.
Sure.
You know, I think at the time I was talking about how he could manipulate his structure to accomplish what he needed to accomplish, and something that he sort of posed as an open letter on Facebook. He used to do that a lot, like just
yes,
get on there. Anyway, so after time, he was like, dude, I gotta put you to work on something. So we met in LA. We were talking about maybe doing the second picture of his two picture deal. And I pitched him a story, and he was like, this is fantastic. This is like so professional. And I was like, well, it's
your background.
That's where I come from. So while we were working on that, he kept slipping in front of me this script for The Shepherd, which was, the proof of concept for The Chosen. And again, I was struck by that brilliant lens. Like, you get to tell the nativity as it's been perfectly laid out in the greatest book ever written, and you get to bring an entire emotional arc to that story by focusing on the shepherd, who we know was there, but for whom we have no context for that journey.
Yeah, incredible.
He then makes the shepherd, and he's pretty shortly thereafter approached by a couple of guys who were like, I think this could be a TV show. And he's like, well, what is this financing? And there's crowdfunding, and he's like, great. I just, right. I'll just light it all on fire right now. Like,
for those watching, for a filmmaker to hear, we're going to crowdfund it. Let's just say The Chosen's an outlier.
I mean, I think Mystery Science 3000 had been the record with like $3 million.
Sure.
And we needed like 8 to do a season. And I'm like, great. Who we got? And he introduces me to Tyler. It
2017
was like
now?
2017.
So 2017, Dallas does The Shepherd. He gets approached to do a series version of The Shepherd.
Based on The Shepherd.
Based on The Shepherd. You're going to crowdfund it. The money's not there yet, but let's start the process. So you meet Tyler, who would become one of the trio of writers that you guys would become. Okay.
The plan was we were going to write 4 episodes and go shoot those if we got enough money. So let's go for it. Let's go for it. Okay, so the way we started out at first was we needed to know where we're going to fade in, where we're going to fade out.
Okay.
And I had been having a conversation with Amanda on the way home from the airport, and she told me about the woman at the well, because I had asked her the question, what's a moment where Jesus gets to the point of no return, where for him, he is crossing a bridge that's going to burn behind him? And she's like, one of my favorite stories is the woman at the well. And I'm like, tell me about that. She's like, it's so critical to evangelicals because it speaks to redemption and faith. Like, it speaks to our call to share the good news. And it's a woman that's the protagonist of this event. And I was like, brilliant, that's it. So we start the next morning, and I say, let's start.
That's the fade out point.
Let's start with this, and we're going to write to this. That'll be season 1. Next, we need a midpoint. So we talk about our characters, and Dallas, he and Tyler both are drawing on like such amazing, vast stores of knowledge and various preachers, and Tyler's drawing on apologists and great theologians. So we've been able to figure out our cast of characters, like who we want to include, what they might be like, if we can just get some of their attributes. We don't have to do full bio for anybody yet, but like, let's kind of know who's in play. Okay, what's a moment where a character is faced with a problem and they come up with a plan to solve that problem? They solve the problem and realize there's only more problems ahead. And they're like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm like, it's midpoint. Midpoints are the most important part of the story. But it's really the moment you say, I got to get to the top of this mountain. You climb the mountain.
Yeah.
only to realize there's 26 more peaks.
Got it.
It's the moment where you're given the ring to go throw in the volcano. You go off on and faced with a problem, your best idea to solve it, you follow it to its logical conclusion only to realize, I don't know my butt from a hole in the ground. And you got to find a new way to do things. And they pitched some points, and I was like, the miraculous catch, that one. He said to him right afterwards, you're going to be a fisher of men. He had to quit his job.
Yeah.
He got what he wanted, only to learn like, oh, brother, you don't know yet. You're in for a whole new career, a whole new life, but you're going to have to start from scratch. Mm. And so gosh, we got our midpoint, we got our open, we got our midpoint, we got our ending. We're on our way. Like, let's figure out.
So it sounds like you being the most experienced writer, it sounds like part of your role is really the structure. Is that part of what you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
As freely as Dallas will say, I know more about screenwriting than I've forgotten more than he'll know. Tyler and Dallas both know the Bible better than I may ever know it.
How do you guys come up with, okay, we want to talk about this part of the Bible? Is that something that the three of you guys will discuss?
Yes, that process now requires us to go back and look at what biblical events happened between there and what is this period. So, if his 3-year ministry on earth had, 3 pretty distinct sections, the gathering, the period of popularity, and the period of persecution. And we're in that first part of gathering people. So what biblical stories are available to us by any harmony, and even beyond the harmony? Like what stories do we want to put in here?
Now, when you're reading, are you thinking this is a great story that will encourage people? Are you thinking, no, this will be a great cinematic moment? Are you thinking both?
Maybe both.
Okay.
Our responsibility is to our characters. Okay, we've got a structure that allows for us to have a myth arc that is running through the entire series.
What is a myth arc?
So a myth arc is this driver. If anybody watching is familiar with the X-Files, they'll remember the smoking man. The smoking man is this proxy to which we get to the motivation behind everything that Mulder does, which is to find his lost sister. Deep in his chest, the thing driving him, which was created when he was a child and watched his sister be abducted by something he can only explain as aliens. Mm-hmm. So that smoking man appears periodically to reignite the myth arc through that series.
I see.
Jesus is the light of the world whose actions ripple not only throughout society, but throughout time. And so we are grabbing those ripples and harnessing them for our storytelling purposes in various ways at various times. He might interact with the character like little James at the beginning of season 3 to answer a question that we've posed, but we haven't made prominent. We haven't put the light on this question. It's gaining momentum. And when they get to this critical point of, you're going to go out and heal, well, how do we do that when we have a man among us who is suffering?
Fair question.
Well, when we get to that juncture, we realize that not only is our myth arc keeping Jesus' ministry alive,
I see,
and viewing it on the other side of that electrified fence, we're not always just right up to what is he doing in there. Sometimes Jesus interacts with our characters because he interacts with us, right? We felt like this is an honest way to tell this story. It's a question we can no longer punt. We have to get to a conversation with little James. So he is very much somebody who the camera is sitting on Jesus' shoulder. We don't do that with our show because the drama comes from characters faced with binary value choices in the context of their life. Stay, go. Fight, flee. Love, hate. Like that razor's edge sometimes. Like sometimes it's obvious and it's not very dramatic. But this is a situation where we can simulate choices for Jesus by having him engage in a conversation or not.
So let me ask you on that. On the question of Jesus, did you three agree going into the show of what your image of Jesus was?
I would say no.
Okay.
I would just return us formally to the roles we play. Dallas Jenkins is the creator of The Chosen.
Okay.
I am a screenwriter serving Dallas's his vision. Dallas is the final word in the Jesus that we portray.
Okay.
What we have going for us is that Tyler, Dallas, and I are all three guys linked by the same need. Each one of us needs to wake up and have a connection with God to be alive today. I need it because I have this disease that will kill me in alcohol.
Okay.
Dallas needs it for his own reasons. Tyler's exactly the same. Each one of us wakes up every day with a need for a connection with Jesus Christ. And so when we have differences about how we see God or how we hear God or how funny God is or how serious God treats certain things, we are united in our devotion to the words on that page. We are serving Dallas's vision, and to have a disagreement slightly about what we think Jesus would have said or and not said in a certain situation feels like a minuscule concern to the overall service of the truth of the Bible's words and to the historical accuracy of Jesus on earth.
So it sounds to me like the portrayal of Jesus, the way he's portrayed, is largely Dallas's vision of it, which you and Tyler kind of come alongside and support that. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, and Dallas has always made space in the writer's room for us to disagree, for us to yes and, for us to share our own takes. We each have an active spiritual life, and it's personal to us. So of course it's going to have differences, just like one orange is going to be different from the rest in the bunch. But yeah, the Jesus you see is it comes from Dallas's heart, and he is one of the most thoughtful and generous collaborators. Not only just have I ever worked with, because he's far and away the best, but that I've ever heard of. He is both firm in his direction, and he's open in his honest willingness to listen to a good idea.
What if have you had any theological differences where you go, Dallas, I hear what you're saying. It's your show. I'm here to support your vision, but man, I just don't see the scriptures that way, and I can't agree to do that. Have you ever encountered something like that?
We have, but it. I'll just qualify. No, not in the way you just portrayed it.
Okay.
We're not so far apart, and we haven't had that. There's a conversation about, between Catholics and evangelicals about Jesus' brothers or his cousins, depending on what you think.
Okay.
Right. These questions relate back to Mary, and how did Mary live the remainder of her days after she gave birth miraculously to Jesus. We each, if we each came in with different takes on that material, we just said, we want to show the historical legitimacy of these events. We want to show that the characters the Bible wrote about were real human beings. And so we have something to go off of. The stuff that isn't written about in the Bible, that is on the page of the Bible that we've never seen, we're just making up.
So let's talk about that. How do you answer the question? By very nature of what you just said, Ryan, you're adding to Scripture.
Right. Jesus saying hello or laughing.
Okay.
Those things are not written about either.
Right.
I guess, the way we are approaching it is as honestly and as loyally as we can. Mm-hmm. And if you understand that we are trying to treat those stories in the Bible as honestly and lovingly as we can, you're either along for the ride or you're not.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And there are depictions, red letter depictions, where Jesus, the only utterances are the words in red, and those portrayals are available. So this does say we make a pact. Dallas Jenkins, Tyler Thompson, and Ryan Swanson love this book. We love God. We are imperfect sinning human beings, and we honor God in the truest way that we can. And so it is really a sort of worship for us to even get to do this, and we treat it like that. And I've said this all along the way, Brad, like one of the biggest, most unimaginable things for me is that I write a show that when people hate it, it forces them back into their Bibles. And when it's good, it forces them back into their Bibles. We have so many people who have pored over a book or verse or chapter, and who've come to us and said, you guys had the Passover in this season, but it wouldn't have been then because you showed there's no foliage on the trees. And we're like, dang.
The very fact that it got them into the Word was the win.
Yes, like keep looking for that stuff. We're going to screw up all over the place, but we're not trying to deceive. That's not why we put Passover there. We're trying to, just we're trying to worship, and we're trying to show through these characters the joy and wonder and just miraculous light that that book makes us feel.
Are you a Bible reader in your own life?
Yeah, I have to be. I am in the Bible every day for work, but I have to because I will die without it. And so for me, it's been such a blessing to be able to read the words on the page, stop intellectualizing them, and try to personalize.
Yeah.
Get to ground level. Think about how dusty an area might have been. What's it like to be at the docks in Magdala? So when I see a story, I'm like, this would be great. It's an invitation that God is giving me to get in there and try to see it in 3D.
So what are some stories you've heard of how people have been impacted by the show?
I mean, the big one is anytime anyone says they're now reading the Bible, that's mind-blowing, right? Like, I didn't think I would ever work in Hollywood, like from where I grew up, but forget that. And the idea that like something that I'm doing with people who I adore, like I love being with Dallas and Tyler. I love watching our cast, like, bring their talents and their gifts. Our crew just blows me away. One of the most amazing things is to show up on set and see what our designers have done. It's like you had a dream and you woke up and then you stepped into it and it was way cooler than what you dreamt. Hearing stories about people interacting with the family more. This guy got on the plane with a guitar and he was putting his guitar. He's like, "Oh, Chosen, I love that show." I had a sweatshirt on, and he starts talking when he's still standing. He plops down in the chair. And he's like, "So my whole family, we used to like watch stuff, and then the kids got old. The older kids got older, the young ones, and that 10 years apart, like it was like we couldn't even bridge it with anything. And then The Chosen came, and now my family gets back together on Sundays, and we watch. And I'm just like blown away by the story. Like I can't even believe that. Makes me almost like I have a nervous system reaction where I'm like,
what a gift that God let you experience that, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
That God would give you that opportunity just to see the impact and how God is using you in this season of your life.
Yeah, man, it makes me emotional. Stuff like that, because that's after what I went through and how hollow it was to, be on the ascent in Hollywood, how little that sort of honored God and honored his gifts. It's just mind-blowing that he stuck with me, like that part is just unreal to me. We got a video the other day of this jail cell in Brazil, overcrowded jail cell, dirt floors. People are hanging their legs and arms outside the bars, watching episode 1, just clamoring at to
Incredible
for the good news, and can't even imagine those lows that those folks were facing. Those. Maybe God has something in store for them too. Amen.
Man, it sounds like this experience on The Chosen has drawn you closer to God as opposed to major ego say, wow, I'm a part of a big hit show. It sounds like it's been the exact opposite.
Yeah, it is a question that we ask. I mean, to the extent that I think God has in measure given us this process as a very slow build, and I think that as we become comfortable with the responsibility of the show having grown some, we're equal parts, like the lift is intense enough for none of us to be able to look too far down the road. So we can go to Chosen Con and, meet 500 people in a day who have an opinion about what we're doing. And it's likely going to be the softest landing you could ever imagine.
Right.
That weekend ends. It's very humbling to have the gospel open to the crucifixion for me. You can't be cynical. Like, I come in and the coffee's cold. I'm sitting down, my back's hurting today. I open it up and I'm going to write about the crucifixion. Like, forget myself. Forget that stuff. Like, we have an audience of one.